for me with the live streaming. I've done a podcast and everything for D&D. I see several of you in the comments. Are any of you Dungeons and Dragons players or role players, or do you have friends that you're looking for gifts? Like, what is the drive to visit? In the meantime, we're going to be talking about memorable monsters. Uh, I wrote this with a large group of my friends as well as hired freelancers because it was such a big project. Memorable Monsters is unique in the fact that we learned early on in our D&D careers that having a stat block is one thing. Having knowledge, motives, those sorts of resources at your disposal for your D&D character game or D&D games is very important, especially for a busy game master. But even if you're just looking for inspiration, Memorable Monsters is certainly something that is designed to stand out and help fill sort of some of those roles. One of the things that we wanted to do, special for Memorable Monsters was the fact that we wanted it to be more about the monster and less about the focus on just the stat blocks. Now, don't get me wrong, the abilities are pretty awesome. We had a lot of fun playtesting these, and we made them as engaging and dynamic as we can. But what sets Memorable Monsters apart is that it really does encourage a push towards building out and fleshing out your monsters and NPCs. And we do that by going into great depth to give you a little bit of background knowledge. I mean, we got several paragraphs. Here's Galita Dolmag, for instance. She's a pretty interesting one. So I'm going to share some of the kind of details that we cover and tell you a little bit about this character. And if you have any particular questions, please ask. Please let me know. I think that any questions you have that I can answer would probably be super valuable, not only for me as a writer, but also for the audience that will be watching this after the fact. So one of the core things we started with giving a basic little history little splooge over here for the monsters and the NPCs. And it goes into pretty good detail, but then we once we talk a little bit about the physicality and the kind of the personality traits of this character, we also give a background. Where did the NPC come from? Where did the monster come from? What is their, what is what is about them that makes them unique? So even if you choose to use, Galita Dolmag, who is a sort of uh, demon, I guess you could say, but more of a mix. Used to be a human and made some bad deals, end up becoming a master of spycraft and forming webs of lies and stuff like that, which made her really fun. Uh, we go into the background that says, that she used to be a, elegant and fair elf. Of course, her love for court politics is certainly what brought her excitement and joy, and of course, that transitions even into this monster version of herself. Learning the secrets and desires with the background is something that she strives for. So Galita quickly learned that she could leverage the knowledge that she had acquired to basically get whatever she wanted, which is a huge thing to discover in as far as a monster motivation, right? Once your monster learns to pull those strings and to get what they want, it can really be a powerful tool for your stories and campaigns, because that's the type of monster or villain that could be behind kind of manipulating the characters without them knowing, which also encourages the sorts of abilities that would help them detect that sort of stuff. But going into her background, she was supposed to be wed to a king, Salazar, which was kind of interesting. He commanded, and she was his commanded, advisor. Unfortunately, her court politics and lies and thievery got her caught, and thus she was punished with a powerful incantation that basically banished her to the dimensions of demons, right? Which truly did alter her physique. Once again, she went from a beautiful looking elf to this sort of monstrosity that is absolutely hideous. And that's another thing. The artwork in here is pretty phenomenal. And then once you get through kind of the bit about the character, then the background, we have current motives. One thing that really drives an interesting story and campaign when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons or any role play. Honestly, outside of the stat blocks, is system agnostic. So if you're playing Pathfinder or Numenera or something else, Memorable Monsters certainly appeals to that. So you can kind of use this book across all your different RPGs. You might have to make some slight alterations to the stat block, but just looking at some of the core features, as game masters, we're pretty good about that, as they are written for 5th edition. So current motives is one of the core aspects we wanted of Memorable Monsters as we were writing this, this book up here, because it's good to have a collection of monsters, but if you can provide the game master or dungeon master with a bit of what would this character do and how and why they do the things they do, is a very important aspect for binding it to your stories and campaigns. And us providing you a little bit of pathway can help springboard your own ideas to enhance the stories, as well as the campaign and adventure for your party. So in this one, she's got some pretty interesting motives. Working behind the scenes, she's watching and attempting to watching over kingdom politics. So she works hard to kind of put pieces into place so she can control. She's got a network of spies, I guess you could say, these threads that she manipulates and pulls, and some that have worked with her have started to become identified as a dream flayer, which I think is a really interesting little name for her, because she uses magic to jump into the dreams in the as well as like the subconscious, and even a little bit of magical charm manipulation, as well as having her own servants that kind of follow her like almost like a cult. So Galita Dolmag is really one that's more about schemes and masterminding than actually doing the work herself, which this makes her, extremely fun as a reoccurring villain, as you can slowly, use her motives to kind of fill in the different adventures. Everyone does the adventure that goes, go and slay the kobolds that are, hiding in this mountain. But what if the reason they're there is to collect information on a specific, NPC or character or dragon or monster or something else? Galita is the type of person to really do something like that. And so here, just like all of our memorable monsters, this fantastic book, it really delves into a couple little details that we offer you. First, we give some kind of guidance for the game master as different ways, she can, be used to kind of fit that current motive. And so an information giver, for instance, Galita is pretty big on, there is little that she doesn't really know, the inner workings of court politics and current events. So she's often more than happy to share information, even with adventurers. That is, of course, if the characters have equal value of information, right? I want to thank you guys very much for joining. I see Rainiff. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Probably should check this little thing here. There's really a lot that goes into. Hey, Thomas, thanks for joining. Silverwolf, Kathy Evans, thank you guys for swinging by. So as we continue kind of talking about Galita and Dolmag, we, giving her information, and information broker is a very good tool in order to guide and hook adventurers, because it may just be as simple as they struggle to gather what they need and they have to go sort of this underground source with Galita to really, I guess, connect the dots, which means she's going to require something of them. And sharing secrets is something that can really twist and change your campaign, especially if the dungeon master or the game master involved has players that have weaknesses or flaws that you want to exploit, right? Because that becomes the value, right? Or maybe they know the flaw or weakness of a faction that they support or something like that. So really digging into that allows a lot of that kind of lore and political intrigue, if you like that sort of stuff. Of course, we also, recommend under ways to use her, a quest giver, for instance. There in this one, it says, in this segment, it says, there is a conspiracy to overthrow the ruler of a particular kingdom. Somehow those behind it have evaded her informants. So she wants the characters to discover the name and locations of those behind this treasonous act. So this is really interesting because then this admits that she doesn't know everything. Hey, thanks for joining again. Appreciate it there, Zongnar. The fact that she's willing to approach adventurers in your stories and campaigns to get what she wants means she's willing to admit that she's not perfect. And that alone can be a weakness too, right? Why doesn't she know this? And you can springboard those ideas off of your RPG, right? Um, then, of course, we have a quest target. The Dream Flayer manipulation and deceit is known by many, especially in the underworld, and they don't really like being manipulated and blackmailed and all that. That kind of goes with what Galita and the Dream Flayers do. So there are many who will like to see her dead, so she could become the target of a hunt, right? But this makes for an interesting adventure because you got to remember when you're running a memorable monster like this, they have their own motives, personalities, flaws, ideals, bonds. And because of that, even if that becomes a target, they're willing to do whatever they have to do to achieve their goals. And sometimes that means manipulating others so that those others even being the players so that they get redirected in some capacity. There's many different spells and abilities that can allow, somebody like, Galita to trick the players into maybe taking out a target for her that they believe is in fact her. And I think that that's really interesting, pulling the kind of the wool over their eyes, right? Once again, if you're looking for that type of story, that's going to have a lot of twists that'll really, just capture your friends and your players and everyone at the table. Because let's be honest, if Galita becomes your target and she knows you're onto her, she's going to know all the party's weaknesses. She's going to know their strengths. She's going to be able to devise strategies to counter their most potent abilities. And that is going to lead to excellent roleplay, I think. At the very least, for one battle when they're shocked, when they're caught off guard. Hey, what's up, CP Van? How are you doing, man? Oh, yeah, I'm not sure why my Twitch thing says Final Fantasy 7. Oh, well. I'll have to deal with that later, I guess. Twitch doesn't really seem to want to ever update with the rest of the stuff since I use a program to kind of push those updates out to everything. Um, kind of moving back to, delving more into what Memorable Monsters offers as far as stat blocks and artwork and stories, material for your stories and campaigns. One thing that I found really lacking in some of the not just some of the details of like the monster manuals and stuff, but also things that some game masters, especially, newer GMs or DMs kind of miss and forget to do is to make sure that they do not only have short-term motives, but they have long-term motives. Um, Obviously, Galita, Domog strives to become a single point of knowledge and control around the world. Now, she wants to be able to pluck a string and ensure events unfold to her will. Every decision she makes is to that end. So this really gives you a guide of how the game master would react. Hey, thanks for coming, Debbie. And man, the text is really small. Whose name is that? Sierra. I appreciate you guys joining. If you have any questions about memorable monsters up here, please let me know. Once again, I'll answer any questions you may have, whether they're yeah, definitely this is definitely the perfect mastermind rogue. You said it. You said it right on there. You said it right there. Silver. Oh, you like this character, Kathy? Thank you very much. I'm glad you like it. Actually, this is one of my ones that I really enjoy because I'm very much into political intrigue and pulling strings, and then tricking the players into take one action just to find out that the action they took it wasn't exactly something that they were good in, uh, and that really can leave a sour taste in the players' mouths. But in the same token, having something like Galita here means that they will have to think more carefully of their decisions, less rushing in and just, swinging axes and, dropping swords, which is unfortunately what happens a little too often in tabletop RPGs. So now that we've kind of got the long-term motives, the current motives, a couple different ways, and of course, one of the other ways you can use her as a villain, because she's got so many cogs in motion, for politics, it's going to be very easy for adventurers to be kind of swept up in her, machinations, which is, pretty good, especially if they start to throw wrenches in her plan without knowing it. That becomes a whole new problem. So what separates her apart outside of that? So we have all of our memorable monsters in this book have ideals. So for Galita, control and manipulation are pillars of progress. Without that, sentient creatures will just fight and kill each other for eternity. It's kind of how she feels, and so she feels like she really needs to control everything. In a fantasy world like Forgotten Realms or Numenera or even Midgard, are all kind of like that, where you have these sort of I don't know how you want to say that, these sort of areas that are just always being fought. They're always at war. They're always fighting with each other, and that's kind of part of it. And that's something that really drives her to be better. And if she does the work she needs to do, then those things should come down, or at the very least be within what she needs to know. Which once again isn't exactly going to be what everyone else wants, and that's part of the challenge that she deals with. So it's important to remember when you're building out your characters and NPCs, whether they're from memorable monsters or your own at home stuff. Try to do some stuff there, and it totally just backfired on me. There we go. I found it again. Sorry, I had a little issue there. So the thing to remember is, what is their ideals? What are the things that really drive them to do what they want to do? The reason for that is because if you don't know what your villains, your NPCs, your monsters care about, it makes it harder to make them memorable and sustain that in your stories and campaigns. Um, and that may seem like a small thing for most advanced GMs, but it's something that easily can get lost in kind of the tumult of all the stuff that a game master has to do and kind of get pushed to the side. But beyond just ideals and memorable monsters, we know that giving them a bond, something that they care about, something that they treasure, something that they might even be willing to throw away their plans if it was in jeopardy. That's not something we often consider, at least in my experience, when it comes to uh, monsters and villains in any sort of fantasy setting, because sometimes it's easier to make them big bad evil people than to give them some complex feelings and flaws and motives. So for her bond, for instance, she says her network of dream flares is the fruit of her labor and her love. It is of the utmost importance to her. It is her life's work, after all. She will protect it by any means necessary. So what does that mean for adventurers who start taking out, her spies and, her sources of information, right? It's going to change the way she perceives what they're trying to do, because now they're directly going against not only her love, her bond, but also her long-term motives. If they end up, taking out some cultists or whatever, NPCs you have following her along, um, she's going to take it personal. That's her passion. She's worked too hard to let a couple of crazy adventurers just jump right in and ruin her good, her work that she's put all this effort and time into. Right. So, uh, once again, Galita Dolmag is a very interesting character, because of this. She's almost like a mother of spies, but because she's got the nature, she's been cursed and is this natural like demon thing, it makes it hard to kind of see her that way. And any adventurer that walked into a room seeing her leading a cult probably wouldn't think that. But the fact that her bond is to care for all these creatures is a huge it's a huge aspect of her character, which then can evolve into what makes her memorable. And of course, just like any other, memorable monster that we have, they have to have flaws. Nobody is perfect. When I used to read quite heavily the Percy Jackson series. In fact, was watching it that Rick Riordan did that just came out on Disney again. And one of the biggest turning points for some of those characters is what's known as their fatal flaw. And our characters in D&D, as well as our monsters, should all be the same, right? They should all have that same flaw that can be exploited, especially if the characters can learn about it and take advantage of it. The most obvious one that happens all the time is greed, right? I'm greedy. If you do something that bribes me, maybe I'll help you out. But for our memorable monsters, we wanted them to be a little more engaging and a little more memorable, right? At least that was the hope. So, what is Galita Domog's flaw? Due to the nature of her deceit and constant schemes over people, she herself finds it difficult to trust anyone. Because of this, forming meaningful bonds outside of her dreamers and even within is difficult and extremely difficult and sometimes even impossible. For Galita, everyone allies with her because they are forced to, or because they want something. In spite of this, she does occasionally think back to her days when she was a thing of pure beauty, missing in the passing glances she no longer receives. So the fact that it's not easy for her to form relationships, in spite of being able to manipulate and control everything, is a huge, interesting aspect to her character. Because that means if the characters or NPCs try to, or the players try to, get a little more involved with her, it's going to be a very difficult journey for them. It's not going to be one successful skill check of persuasion. What it is, it's going to be one good successful skill check, and then she's going to want you to do a bunch of stuff. But even then, she's never going to trust you. So what does that mean? For a memorable monster like Galita, that means taking precautions. No matter how hard the characters work, if she's never truly going to trust them and they do have to work together, she's going to be cautious about it. Now that we've talked a little bit about one of my favorite monsters and the memorable monsters, Galita. Once again, I love political intrigue and the machinations that go in with that. The silver spoon is so tempting. Absolutely, absolutely, Thomas. You are not wrong. And so for me, that's a big one. And I always want my stories to be interconnected and everything, which can get kind of out of control sometimes, webs of connections. But I think that those make for some of the most interesting stories because as a game master, I have to then think, okay, the players went and did this. How does that relate to the overall goal of the villain? Well, the villain has a problem with it, but who really has a problem with is this other person I created who this directly, goes against their, long-term motives. So now that we kind of talked about her character a little bit, let's talk about what makes her unique as a monster, right? Now, it's worth noting that the CR ratings and stuff in here, you can adjust them, but I put them where I intended to use them. And when I did use them, what I got out of it. So for Galita, she is uh, technically, I keep saying demon, but technically she's categorized in monstrosity, but she is a CR10. And she has some pretty potent abilities that really help her get to that point. That if the character stumble across her, she isn't out without her subordinates, right? So she has a really interesting ability called manipulating presence. So any creature that starts its turn within 60 feet of her must take a wisdom save, and on a failed save they become charmed by Galita for 1 minute, and on a success they become immune. So whenever Galita deals damage to a charmed creature, the creature can repeat the saving throw. But here's the thing: she won't do damage to a charmed creature. In fact, she will sit back and watch as players engage players in forced combat because of, manipulation. And what's interesting about that is, as a game master, you can enhance that depending on how close the players are trying to get to her, right? Maybe one of the characters really finds her interesting and wants, more to do with her. If that's the case, when it comes to, engaging her, there might be, penalties to that player, and they might succumb to it a little easier than just some, characters that stumble upon her for the first time ever. Thanks for joining, Brady. Appreciate it. If you have any questions about memorable monsters, please let me know. Uh, Big on fantasy. But anyway, so that's one of her abilities. And of course, she's a spellcaster, so she has abilities like calm emotions, charm person, bestow curse, suggestion, bane. And of course, she has one use of Gias. Now, if you don't know what Gias is, woo, that is a game changer if somebody fails their saving throw. It is brutal. She will make somebody believe anything she wants. And that can, once again, getting back to that manipulation, can change the tide of any scene, not just combat, any scene. She can pull and push and tug and force the world into a shape that she wants. And because of that, you know, she's a threat. Like, are the players going to prepare for that? They may not know that she has that particular spell or ability, but knowing that she's a master of manipulation doesn't really necessarily indicate that she uses magic, right? So, barbarians are definitely, have a have a concern here when it comes to you know, Galita, because they often are, weak against those sort of mental controls. Um, it is worth noting that she does have, magical resistance, so she, gains bonuses or advantage against saving throws that are people trying to affect her with, spells and other magical effects. But the one thing that really makes her interesting is her attack. Once again, she's a manipulator, so she doesn't have a lot of focus on combat as far as like brute strength or anything like that. But even her simple strike, her simple claw attack here in Memorable Monsters for Galita is dangerous. Not only does it deal slashing and psychic damage, but it curses the target. Now, by the way, I don't think there's nearly enough curses. I think we need more curses in diseases in our stories and campaigns. I think every time you do a survival check to go navigate, maybe you stum and get a poison disease or something. But anyways, so when she does this claw, once again, it does physical damage and mental damage with the psychic attack. But the magical curse takes effect whenever the target takes a short or long rest. Now notice that this is something that really makes Galita a memorable monster, is that the player characters don't feel the effects right away. And honestly, if they get hit, they don't even get an additional save, which is pretty brutal. But once again, she's not meant to be a hardcore fighter. So this curse, if she can hit, takes effect during a short or long rest. Now, filling the target's thoughts with horrible images and dreams. The cursed target gains no benefit from short or long rests. The curse lasts until it is lifted by the remove curse spell or similar magic. So now we're talking about a monster that is going to affect the players long after the battle is done, which isn't something that happens very often. Now, there is definitely some risk to that, but if you play your cards right, the players will make the connection, right? And what's interesting is because it requires specific types of magic to remove, the players may not necessarily immediately have access to those. So now you end up on a quest to save your friend, or you didn't like the guy because he was a real douche cockbite anyway. So you're just like, we're done. Sorry, you're on your own. Which has happened. Thomas Kelly, I've always wanted a spy banquet for secret documents. You don't know the enemy spies are the messengers with the documents. No weapons or violence at the party, only intrigue and wits. I absolutely love that. Those are some of my favorite stories and campaigns, which inspire characters like Galita from Memorable Monsters, because fighting is easy and dungeon crawls are fun. I get that. I like that. But making players and their characters kind of think outside the box of how to resolve an issue without chopping it up, I mean, we see this in even, shows like Critical Role, where even sometimes Grog gets a good one in, you know what I mean? Gets a good idea and shocks everyone. So everyone can participate in these and we can make it interesting. And even if it's just you need a distraction, you can always find things for the players to do outside of just, swinging a sword and blowing things up. And running entire stuff like that is a little more difficult than just like a straightforward combat. But I also think these are the sorts of things that create situations that force the players, whatever RPG you're playing, to really think about what they're going to do and then get creative, which is what I love about these sorts of things, right? And that's what really inspired me to create Memorable Monsters, because I want other people to have a tool and a resource to really jump in and say, oh, this is all I need for my villain, or this is the NPC that they're going to run into, and have it all right in front of them. And they don't necessarily have to take the time to create it, but it doesn't mean they can't alter and shape them in a different way. And because of that, when you have Memorable Monsters, you can really just use it as a jumping off point. You don't have to take exactly the way we've written it, which makes everything very versatile. You can simply change a bond or a flaw if you wanted to, or you can go back into the whole story of the monster and change it as well. It is worth noting, like, we've got some of these got some really cool maps from Dyson Logos, that he does really, really good maps for some of the more legendary creatures, which is nice. There's a lot of different variety. There's 50 memorable monsters in here. And of course, all the art is kind of cool too, not just for the monsters themselves, but as well as the background art pieces. And I've got a lot in here that are really just jump out at me. But there's another one in particular I kind of want to talk about that I thought was very interesting, and I hadn't seen anything kind of like that before. If you can give me a second to find it. We had some really good writers on here. JVC Perry does a lot for like Lore Smith and some big companies. I think he's even written for Wizards of the Coast and the like. So we got a variety of different, monster pieces to choose from that are just jaw dropping. Get it? Jaw dropping. Some are humans too, right? Here's a assassin, right? That really has lives by his, own bit of honor, which I think is great, which even allows him to be like an ally, which is pretty cool. And there's quite a few of those that can be allies, but some of them you wouldn't think. I mean, obviously Arwell, the unicorn. I mean, mostly of the time when we think of unicorns, unfortunately, we don't consider them sentient, but they are. They're very intelligent celestial creatures. And so that was one of the ones I wanted to make sure that I kind of included in this sort of breakdown. I'm trying to find this is a fun one. I love doing tasks that are monster battles and stuff with dynamic battlefields. So giving monsters these AoEs that kind of stick to the ground, so it creates like a hazard, is always pretty cool. We really do cover quite a few different variety of monsters and NPCs. And once again, they're not all these big, vicious, violent, monsters. Here's one that's basically a sentinel, right? He's an ever sentinel. Basically, somebody cursed to guard an area for eternity. Which leads to, good interactions with the players, because his guard duty, he's a nice guy, but he'll take you out if you try to bypass him, because that's part of the role that he's been assigned and the goals that he's set for the oaths he's taken. We even got, a god king, right? Dragons. We always have all these, overall details of how fantastic dragons are, but then we don't get detailed backgrounds about specific ones all the time. Not, ways we can use them, long-term, short-term motives, all those sorts of things really are critical to making a monster something memorable that game masters are going to want to keep bringing to their stories and campaigns. Now, obviously, if you just, take them out and stuff right away, then you kind of lose that a little bit. So I do encourage game masters to do reoccurring villains, and you see it in movies too, and shows, right? Popular shows where the villain leaves one of his subordinates to get away, and if he had just killed the players themselves, it'd be done with it and it wouldn't be a problem. But they fight, they get stronger. But part of that, what makes that really good is it allows the players themselves to build a connection with that personality, which I think is, once again, that memorable aspect. If this character is so important that they can't be bothered by adventurers that are interrupting the flow of their conversations, or the flow of their meetings and the work that they have to do, well, that just says that they're confident those player characters are weak, and are basically outright saying that. But it gives us, the game master, the biggest opportunity to make the characters feel about that villain or monster the way we want them to. And what do I mean by that? So, also, this is the monster we're going to talk about, Iron Rot. This is really cool. Uh, don't see nearly enough of the flame skulls getting some action. It's a variant of it, but anyways, um, when it comes to, wanting, as game masters, bringing that kind of skill of wanting the players to feel a certain way about a character, it's easy to just say it, but that doesn't necessarily build an emotional connection to the monsters, right, and to the NPCs that the party has. Instead, what it is, oh, he's big, mean, and dangerous. No, with a reoccurring villain or a memorable monster, we have the opportunity to show them why are they like that. Don't tell them in words, because that's just going to limit the enjoyment of discovering it. I mean, saying, the big bad villain manipulates people and it leads to thousands of deaths is one thing. The characters walking onto a battlefield where soldiers slaughtered innocent civilians due to a manipulation and a hallucination or spell that altered their perceptions is going to have a way bigger impact than just saying that the monster did that, right? So if Galita manipulates one faction of enemies to attack civilians of an opposing kingdom, but they don't know they're civilians. Maybe she uses I think it's the seeming spell to alter their perception, and the players learn that. It goes from being this, oh, she's bad, to, oh my God, can you believe what just happened? And then what if you tell the ones that were manipulated that now the NPCs that took out those civilians are crushed because they would never do something like that, right? But then here comes freaking, Galita and her actions cause that. So now you can become allies. Your players can become allies with that kingdom, which may have been a villain before, and now you've got a kind of a similar direction to go. Ricardo is asking, can we purchase this in hardback as well as PDF? Yes, you can. If you go to the link below, I think it should have a link for both of those, at rebrand.ly/memorable monsters. Or just go to critstore.com and find it at critacademy.com. Or if you're on Whatnot, you can order it right through the Whatnot app. So once again, those are things that I think make monsters truly memorable. And we don't, as game masters, always have the opportunity to do that. Most of people are busy. We got a lot going on. You got to work a lot of hours, both school as well, or maybe both, children. So having a book like this that can help seed those ideas is really a fantastic start to building a story that is fun and engaging, and more importantly, memorable, right? That's the goal. We want our stories to be memorable. And while I love dungeon crawling, I don't typically find those memorable. Now, I have significantly improved my skill set with stuff like memorable monsters to make even those more fun and engaging. So, um, but yeah, so let's talk about another monster here. So, kind of in that vein, we're going to move away from the Galita, who once again is one of my personal jams. I love that sort of play. We're going to delve a little bit different. Thanks for joining there, Richard, and I'm glad you're interested in the product. A lot of work went into this pretty big book. All right, so we're going to talk about Iron Rot. So what is Iron Rot? Iron Rot is a skull aflame and coated in dull cast of iron. This is all that remains of a devoted cleric of the Forge, Alessandra Akama. whose ritual of apotheosis went terribly awry. Okay, so now think about that. We went from just a flame skull monster, right? Which I think is a CR3. This one's a CR5, but it takes that sort of inspiration. And we now actually have a history. It's not just a flaming skull. It used to be a cleric, like a devoted cleric. Like, what happened? Like, right off the bat, what happened to this thing to cause it to become this just monstrosity, right? Because that's the thing we don't think about. We always assume all monsters are born as monsters, and that's not the case. Many are the result of something else becoming a monster. You see that a lot with lower level demons, right? People do bad stuff; they get banished to the depths of the hells, and they become a variety of demons depending on that, and then they work their way up, devouring stuff. But anyways, so when a cleric became when she became undead, her cult following remained loyal to her. That's interesting. Uh, as her intellect magically remained intact, her charisma as a leader also remained. So now you're talking about a flaming skull that can deliver a motivational and powerful speech that can bring people to its way of thinking. Already a step up, right? Not something once again, we as game masters would think about when looking at a stat block, right? And that's the purpose of memorable monsters. The purpose is to engage the mind in the not only the mind of the game master but also the audience, and how the players can use their skill checks to learn some of these bits of story. um uh she now has a vast cult with agents both overt and concealed. Ironrot's aim is to fell the deity of the Forge in the hope that once they are destroyed, she will take its place, or it will take its place. It's a she, I think. Think about that. So now we already in the first little paragraph here about Ironrot, which is, I mean, just like everything else, is a couple pages long of text, small font, but it's there. We have a lot of information. She used to be a devoted cleric. Due to something going awry during one of her rituals, it broke her body but left her mind and her skull intact, burning with the divine fires of her faith, or whatever you want to call it. That already is an interesting story, and I can imagine a lot of different. Hey, Cap, thanks for joining. Milky, you too. If you guys got any questions, please let me know. That too, interesting. Already, this year's villain was last year's hero. Yes, Thomas, absolutely, dude. That is really how it goes. I just realized that's got the wrong title up there. Didn't even know. I don't know how that happened. It was supposed to be the one above it. There we go. How about we fix that? um, but yeah, you really did say it well there. You like Ricardo says he likes the idea of the adventuring party actions being tied to the big bad boss origin story. That is really cool. Actually, there is this could, let's just go off of this one right now. This could be it. It talks about this thing went awry. Maybe you're fighting the cleric lady, and for whatever reason, and they're the reason it goes awry, and then she comes back later as this iron rot memorable monster, that they are the result, their actions are a direct result of creating their new villain. So you're right on it, Ricardo. I think we see that with in like Batman, right? The Joker, in a lot of those origin stories, Batman's actions are a direct result in creating the Joker. So I really think that's a really, really good way to do that. Um, so as well as being a charismatic leader capable of bestowing great boons onto her followers, Ironrot is terribly powerful herself. The flames that surround her burn with immense heat and can leap from their origin to a point of her choosing. Furthermore, she can cause spontaneous bursts of exhausting heat and lash out, entrapping people in searing chains, which are anchored to her jaw. Oh, man. This was actually written by JVC Perry. Once again, phenomenal writer. And I totally get hardcore Ghost Rider feels from this. Had a brain fart of his name for a second. Where you got these flaming chains that can now bind the characters. Once again, talking about that, dynamic control of and dynamic combat. having binding up and controlling people is a really great way to force them to change the way they act and behave in the middle of combat. But before we're getting ahead of ourselves, before we get more into that, let's talk a little bit about, the background of Iron Rot and the, Memorable Monsters, book here. Um, Really nice artwork, fantastic. I really like it. So it talks a little bit about, she was being a human forge cleric. Her faith was boundless, and she gave her entire life to worshiping the deity of forge, smithing, creation, and flame. Unfortunately, she became so obsessed with her faith that pride, obsession, and narcissism took hold. She believed herself the most devoted and most holy, and the most deserving of blessings. When the deity Alessandra worshipped failed to deliver the powers she believed she was owed, the cleric decided to replace that deity herself. Isn't that's just so? This is something we see in some like pop culture stories and stuff. Like you see it in the original God of War, right? Spoiler alert for the original that's really, really old. He ends up fighting Ares, trying to kill him for Ares tricking him into killing his own family, and so he takes out Ares and becomes a new God of War. I mean, that's kind of what's going on here with Iron Rot too, right? Now, obviously, the memorable monsters and player characters as a whole, their lofty goals aren't always going to be attainable, right? um, but after decades of delving into research and accumulation of followers, she believed that she uncovered a pathway to godhood, and in a dangerous ceremony conducted that by herself and her cult, bathing herself in this forge inferno that she believed would turn her to ash and reincarnate as a god of the forge. Now, well, not as a god of forge, as an avatar of the mortal realms of that deity. Instead, she was consumed by the flames and turned undead by the failed ritual. But despite her failed transformation to reach divinity, her cult followed. Her body and consciousness still survived, and she was able to try to take time to rethink her strategy and try a different approach. So, what does that mean for Iron Rot right now? For her current motives, her and her cult seek to gather knowledge of powerful magical weapons, arcane knowledge about the extraplanar realms of the gods, and any dark rituals related to holy artifacts that lead to godhood, right? So she's also wanting to build her own following, as she understands that favor and prayer from her followers are what will continue to boon and bless her with her divine powers. Now, you'll notice it says believes. Doesn't necessarily mean that's how it's gonna work, right? When it comes to something like the Iron Rot and Memorable Monsters, just because we believe something doesn't mean that's the way it's going to unfold. I mean, she did burn herself. You think she'd been done with that after surviving, but she's not. So this is interesting too, because it also indicates that because she's seeking out these magic items and dark rituals, that can draw attention from adventurers too. Magical items, um, if they encounter their cultists, that's a reason to give the cultists powerful magical items. Because if they stumble across them and they're chasing down Iron Rot, or maybe they don't know it's Iron Rot at the time, they're chasing her down and trying to unlock their secrets and the threat that they pose, and it may not even be a threat that they pose to the mortal realm. It just ends up being that, if they take out this god, one of the player characters has a personal vested interest, or maybe the god of the forge is concerned because maybe she's getting close and it doesn't know how to deal with that. So it tasks one of its champions, one of its followers, a great tie-in to character archetype and character builds, of a challenge that I need you to be my weapon, my hammer, and I need you to go smash this this Iron Rot, and turn it to slag, right? Because one thing that I think many don't realize, or maybe they don't consider in their stories and campaigns in D&D or any fantasy story for that matter, is that there are rules that typically bind deities, and some of those rules prevent them from doing certain actions. Now, this was more common in like uh, older myth lore and stuff. They were all powerful, but they still were bound by rules and created by whatever the king of the world is, whether it's Zeus or Odin or whatever, right? But mortals aren't always bound by those, right? So they can kind of break some of those, which does give the player characters a little bit more leverage, I think, to ask for things. So, anyways, the fact that they're collecting magical items and dealing with dark rituals gives another opportunity to unlock lore and exploration aspects of what makes your world tick, whether it's Forgotten Realms, Numenera, or Midgard, or some other custom world you've made that is running memorable monsters. Now that because her agents are capable of smithing weapons and armor of incredible value and magical potential, they frequently use these items and techniques uh, as bargaining chips, right? So you want to find a way to get I hate the term +1, +2, or +3 swords in 5e, for instance. Stupid name. They should be called something else, but that's where we're at. I think for a while there was calling them like superior crafted, master crafted, or something like that. I don't remember, but so I wasn't really treating them as magical for purposes in game. But anyways, so now that because they do these things, they might be able to offer some services to the characters, becoming and offering that leverage, which leads into what are the different ways that we can use Iron Rot and her cult in our stories and campaigns. Well, Memorable Monsters gives us kind of those tools and those resources to kind of spur those ideas. One of the first ones on here I really like is a merchant or tutor. The Iron Rot, which is also the term for the not only the monster but also her cult, know much about the creation of magical weapons and armor, and can provide them to parties in need. Of course, nothing comes for free. You'll find that as a common trend with any sort of trade or deal, right? Equivalent exchange. The Iron Rot care little for money, favoring new recruits or arcane information instead. So immediately, hey, there's this group that can help you craft maybe some magical or better equipment that you want, but you're going to have to do something for them because they've got all the money they clearly need. They can make magical items and sell it. What they can't do is create new recruits. So giving that kind of path in exchange is interesting, and I think something that would require more of the role play aspect in the lore and the exploration, and really will enhance the opportunities of the players and the game master to really expand their story and have potential opportunities for the players to be involved in putting people in a bad situation to later find out got them killed, because trying to fight a deity or whatever is probably not going to go well, whether the player characters are directly involved or not. We can still tie those actions. And if you're truly bringing your world together and bringing it to life and making it memorable, whether with monsters or lore or stories, those events can happen off screen, and it can pass through word of mouth from the NPCs and the characters run into in cities and towns. Oh, did you hear about what happened to the Iron Rot Guild? I heard of many of their new recruits were turned to cinders. Oh, I don't know what happened, but I heard they went up to the top of that mountain. They say where the divine forge lives. Hearing about those things in passing and knowing that the player characters have a direct result, once again, is a way to breathe life into your world using a simple way to use this monster and flesh out your world. Now, you'll notice I didn't give there's not a specific name to the deity reference, because we want you to fill it with your own world creations, right? These are meant to be shaped and fit directly into your stories and campaigns without much work needed to change them, and you really shouldn't. If you don't have enough deity of Forge, well, guess what? You get to fill your world with one now and connect it and make it a critical aspect of whatever adventure ties to the Iron Rot, character encounters that your players go through. Um, So what else do we have here? So beyond just a merchant or tutor for crafting magical items, if you want to include that in your games, also a quest giver. The Iron Rot often have requests that need fulfilling by skilled adventurers. The cultists can do many things, but fighting beasts to claim their treasures or delving into a blasphemous crypts are not in their typical wheelhouse. So now you're going from a focus that these cultists, they're not typically fighters; they're creators. Now that doesn't mean they can't fight, but they're sure as hell not going to delve deep into some dark crypt or into the inside depths of a mountain to fight a fire elemental to bring you a back part of its, spirit or soul or whatever fragment is remained after it's slain. And maybe it isn't slain. Maybe you need the power of a living, flame spirit to imbue something, but they have to be willing to do it. Right. Well, now you got a whole nother set of quests that the characters have to deal with, and all stemming from one memorable monster. But what's interesting is the more you do that, the more the characters will learn through their own investigations, through their own skill checks as they're going through these adventures. Uh, what about a villain? Well, here we go. Is the once again the more common one. Although not necessarily evil, Ironrot is certainly overzealous and narcissistic. If characters worship the current Forge deity or are determined to keep the pantheon in status quo, they may see Ironrot as a villain for wanting to destroy their deity. That's kind of exactly where I was going there, right? So, once again, tying character stories. The Forge Domain Cleric is a perfect example in 5e. I know there's a variety of those across all the different RPGs, so you could easily kind of tie those in, right? So we kind of talked about the current motives. What is the long-term motive besides the obvious, right? Ironrot seeks to the destruction of the deity of the Forge, and is that so that she may attempt her ritual again to replace the pantheon. That obviously this goal might take centuries to come pass, but despite her fiery temperament, she is capable of playing the long game. I wish I had that sort of patience. Hey, Rapid, thanks for joining. You guys, if you have any questions, anybody about memorable monsters, please let me know. I'm happy to answer any questions. Those of you that have joined, thank you very much. Now we're gonna what makes a memorable monster memorable is not only the backstory of it, but how we can tie it to our characters, but giving them a personality. I mean, a beholder is nothing without a personality. Personality is what makes them unique. Look at Xanathar, for instance. That is one of the most interesting monsters that I think I've seen in some time in at least 5th edition, because we're giving all this information about his personality traits, his loves, his losses, all that sort of stuff, and it makes it just a more memorable experience. Running in and fighting a laser-eyed beholder and then being done with it isn't all that, exciting in most cases. Not that it's wrong to play that way, but with memorable monsters, we want those experiences to be unforgettable, and you do that through passion. So, what are the other things? We talked about current and long-term motives, ideals. So, once again, what is her passion? And honestly, you can probably guess some of it from our discussion. Only amassing immense power and knowledge will Ironrot be able to kill the current deity of Forge and take their place in the pantheon. They need to be replaced, for they no longer serve their position. Do I have plans for a volume 2? Not at the moment. I have a lot of things going on, and making another one of these big, complicated bastards isn't exactly on that list. But it isn't something I'm opposed to. This is definitely a popular book, and people really enjoy it. I know I really enjoyed writing it, but it was so big that I had to hire a lot of writers to help, because it was a big undertaking. I know I had a lot of even some close friends helping out, so it was a little bit bigger than I was ready for at the time. So now that we know her ideals, what about Bond? Once again, you're gonna see a trend with creatures that have followings, right? Their cult, without her cult, Ironrot would be unable to move the necessary circles to gather information. While she does have a strong love and passion for her children, for her followers, as if they were her children. Now, what's interesting about this is there can be leverage for expanding upon this, and I didn't mean to choose two monsters that had that similar ideal. They just happened to be two that had cults, but um, you can tie those together in the greater the greater story of whatever campaign and setting you're trying to run, your monster in. And what I mean by that is maybe those will be awarded high places, in a new church once she's established as the new deity, right? So there becomes a reward there, a thing that one of passion that would be shared from her to her followers. And I can see that completely and utterly changing the landscape of your world's hierarchy. And then on top of that, once they're in those positions, are they going to still remain as, crafters and artisans and stuff like that? Or are they going to change direction and behavior, and do they get special boons and blessings because they are the ones that help make it happen? There's a lot that can go into that bond and how it ties directly to Ironrot even after she's ascended, should you choose to go that route. Um, uh, I think that actually, on the comment of a second volume, I think if we were to sell out and more of what we have, then that would probably be more likely, because a lot of our decisions are based on sales of products, and so right now this sells really well, but there's more like Capes and Crooks does a really was probably one of our top sellers, exactly. So we got a lot of options there of other things that have turned on ROI a little better. Um, Not that this isn't doing really well at all. It's actually pretty fantastic. But some just surprised us, you know, to the point that we really want to kind of focus more on getting the word out there now and expanding our horizons. All right. So, what about her flaw? She's a narcissist, plain and simple. She believes that she deserves to be deity because of her devotion to the Forge and her imagined betrayal by the current Forge deity. This narcissism often gets between her and her goals as she refuses to listen to those who think they know better than her. Furthermore, any cultists who become powerful tend to disappear mysteriously, as if turned to ash and blown away in the wind. Ironrot doesn't like to think that anyone else could rival her power. So now you've got an interesting flaw here. She's got this bond with hers. I love you. I'll take care of you. But if you get as strong as me, well, that's a problem, right? There's not enough for two of us in the world here, right? Um, and I think that makes for interesting. What could be cool is I wonder if you could tie um, a character's like pact to this, right? Would be interesting, like an undead pact or something. It is worth noting that she's technically neutral. She's not necessarily evil, which is why she can have passion and love and all that other stuff. If you have any questions about this character, please let me know. Or, feel free to, if you enjoy it and you like what you're hearing, there's, 48 more of these that'll just, tickle your dice. Feel free to visit and check it out. So before I close out this stream today, I want to talk a little bit about the mechanics of Ironrot and what really makes it stand out. Obviously, it's a flying head, so it has a fly speed. It's only a CR5, so it's something you can introduce relatively early, especially if you start her off as like a level 3, like cleric NPC or something. And then while she transforms and doesn't get what she wants, she actually does become stronger. So those give you some pretty good benefits as well. Obviously, she has resistances, immunities to consider, but we want to talk a little bit about her spell casting. Because she was a cleric, she has access to abilities like Sacred Flame and Searing Smite, Heat Metal, Scorching Ray, and of course, Fireball. Everyone loves Fireball. But aside from the more generic things like Illumination and Magic Resistance, what really stands out is her chain attack. It's got a 15-foot reach that does pretty weak damage, but she's got multi-attack, which then basically binds the target in the chain attack. And she has an ability called Bind that says Ironrot binds a medium or smaller creature grappled by her chains. Until the grapple ends, the target is restrained, and Ironrot can't use her chains on another target. She has 2 such a chains, so she can hold up to 2 different people. That does not stop her from using some of her magic, though. And that really is what makes her interesting, because she's got a fly speed and she grapples you. She can fly up with two people in tow and blast them with her scorching ray or heat metal on them. That's actually the best combo there. um, but it really is an interesting character build and a fun way to take what used to be a pretty generic spellcaster with just the flame skull to giving something more full of you know um, passion, I guess, and more for dynamic combat, and getting the characters emotionally invested in the character, which I think is absolutely fantastic. That is going to be all for today. Talking memorable monsters. I want to say thank you to everyone that joined today and kind of watching, regardless of what platform you're on. If this sounds like something you would want to pick up and add to your stories and campaigns, or if you're a player, something you'd like to get for your game master, please consider heading over to rebrand.ly/memorable monsters or critacademy.com/crit store. Check some stuff out. If you sign up for our newsletter, you'll actually get a collection of our favorite resources, including ones that I use very, very regularly that just help me run my games, and even something a little fun if you like to run kobolds. So I want to thank you guys very much for joining me tonight, and hopefully you guys like this. If you do pick it up and you do like it, please, share it on social media, tag me in it at Crit Academy. I want to hear about it. When you do run a monster, please let me know. Take pictures. I love stuff like that. I want to hear how it went. What did you differently to let it stand out? Hey, Chad, thanks for joining, man. Just closing up shop after talking about memorable monsters. Highly recommend it. And I'm not just saying that because I was writing it, but I wrote it for a reason, for a niche that I felt was needed. And I hope that you guys will enjoy it. And with that, I'd like you to say, keep your blades sharp and spells prepared, heroes. Can I still use that tagline? Even though it's no longer, it's not just me doing Dungeons and Dragons podcast. I guess that. All right, guys. Thank you guys very much. You guys have a wonderful day. And hopefully you'll consider picking up